right, it's exactly 10 o'clock, and I'm very happy to welcome you back today. I know that it was quite late for some of us, and on some days even 10 o'clock seems really early. So it's even cooler that you are here and that you are interested in what is coming next. I'm here with our next speaker, who is Jaana, and she told me that she already liked telling stories when she was a kid. Back then she was lying in the garden telling stories to her younger siblings. Today she develops stories with leaders all around the world. And she's here to tell us more about the topic of storytelling and also its need in today's world. Please welcome Jaana Rasmussen.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm also extremely excited that the room is so full because I was really anxious because I had the slot at 10 o'clock in the morning after the party. So, the need for storytelling in a VUCA world. What is storytelling? Storytelling is actually the way we all talk to each other. Storytelling is the way we communicate to each other as humans. We all have heard two stories our parents told us. We are telling our kids stories. When we come home, we tell our partners or our friends what happened during the day, and we don't tell it by bullet points. We tell it in a story. So when I work with leaders, I actually tell them, you will learn nothing new, you will just relearn something you already know, and that is hidden behind logic and the idea that we can convince people with bullet points and logic, which is not the case. So, storytelling is actually much older than the spoken word. We have communicated, or human beings have communicated through stories and pictures even before there was spoken language. They have painted their stories on the walls and the caves. This is 40,000 years old. And it is a basic human need, not only to live and get by, but also to communicate and to give our knowledge to the people who come after us. So it's actually the same when we post things on Facebook and Instagram. It's the same what our ancestors did 40,000 years ago. They painted their stories on the walls. Stories do something to us. They create human connection, and that's not only a nice thing to say or an idea. There's actually a huge research, for example, from the military research center DARPA in America, that stories are the best way to convey complex information from one person to another. And you can actually see in the brain what it does when people tell stories. There are the same areas in the brain are activated by the storyteller and also by the story listener. So if you can say that storytelling really is a weapon and you can manipulate people with it, and you really have to have an ethic code on how you do that. Storytelling creates empathy, and oxytocin is released when we tell stories and when we listen to stories, and that helps a lot with working with teams. And this is what I do with leaders, how they get information across, that's one thing, but also how they move people to action by creating a common ground and common goals. So what is VUCA? It was good that I spoke with some people on this topic, because sometimes you think a topic is so well known, but it isn't. VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, and it's actually what we all live in today, with a huge information overload and with technological development going very fast. And it means that we have to decide on situations every day where we don't have all the information and we just cannot process the information. But leaders have to make decisions, every one of us has to make decisions. And this is actually the situation in Afghanistan 2010. And this was what the military calls situation theater. And General McChrystal, who's retired now, had to decide on that. And what he said, nobody understands this, and we actually need a far more simpler way of communicating. And it's no coincidence that storytelling is told in the military on a very large scale, and officers learn how to describe situations not by linear thinking and linear explaining, but by stories, because this is the easiest and the fastest way to get information across. So the VUCA world, how do we act in it? Information goes fast, development goes very fast. We are uncertain about our jobs. The world is very complex. We work on a global scale. There's disruption, and there's also ambiguity, because some situations are not clear, just black or white. Sometimes we don't know how to decide and what to do with situations. So what can we do? We can feel overwhelmed, and we can go to default mode and say, well, we try something like project management that has worked before. Or we can actually dive into the VUCA world and give into it and say, I accept that it's VUCA, I accept that I'm within VUCA, and I learn to deal with complexity and uncertainty every day. And the nice thing is there's an antidote to VUCA, and this is no surprise now. The antidote is storytelling. It's creating a vision by telling a story. It is creating understanding when there's uncertainty, because with stories you get information across not by logic, but by a similar situation in a story with a single protagonist who has found a solution for a problem that is similar to the one you're facing now. I'll get to that later. And you create clarity, because things get more clear when you activate not the logic part of the brain, but the part of the brain that's unconscious. And you actually can get into people's brains with stories by using patterns they already know. Patterns are called archetypes, or the dramatic story arc, or maybe some of you may have even heard of the hero's journey. Those are all patterns that are deeply inside us, and we don't question them. So by letting go of bullet points and PowerPoints and using stories, you can get into people's unconscious. And this is as scary as it sounds. So I always tell people you have to have a clear ethical understanding on how to use this. And the answer to ambiguity is actually agility, not making long-term plans, but making shorter plans and iterations. And this is why storytelling is hugely used in new work and agile contexts. Some of you may have come across user stories, or storytelling, or creating stories in design thinking. So the very old and ancient technique of storytelling is has quite a hype now, because we have all these societal changes going on with new work and agility. So when I tell my clients, or when I work with teams and we explain this VUCA world, they are in the middle of VUCA because it's very irritating to have uncertainty and complexity. Then it's getting even more irritating because I ask them, so now you will craft a story. Please find an example for what your situation is. Get back into your life. So I describe my work as some archaeological or sometimes even psychological work, because I'm actually not a storyteller but a story developer, and I make people create stories. Meaning, I decide what's my core message, what do I want to tell. Some of you may know this as the business model canvas. I hacked that and created the storytelling canvas. And the first thing is that you have to decide, what is my message? What message do I want to get across to my audience? And then who's my audience? And what background do they have? What language do they speak? It's useful to speak the language of the audience. So then every story has a challenge. There's nothing more boring when you don't have a challenge to overcome. So pick your challenge. What is your main challenge? And the people I work with, it's usually transformation, digital transformation, or generation X, Y, Z. How do we work with them? How do we create less hierarchical work environments, things like that. Then it's actually the setting, where does my story take place? And here comes the storyteller in. You have to decide what it looks like, what it feels like, what was the floor like, who was in the room. And of course you pick your protagonists in the story. You all know protagonists, the hero, the villain, the sidekick. It can be a nice thing to tell about yourself as the hero. The more humble thing is to think about, maybe I'm the mentor, maybe the hero is somebody else, maybe the heroes are my clients, or in NGOs, the heroes are the people who give them money so we get funding. So you actually pick a perspective, and you can also change that. And I would invite you to play with it, to play with, am I the hero? Is the hero a female character? And concerning all this, the story still has to be true. But as you know, there is no such thing as a perfect memory, and we actually create stories in our brain and remodel them every time we tell them. So this is just an invitation to play and tell your stories differently. Every story needs an antagonist, the villain. You know that from Marvel and DC. And the antagonist can be, and this is the only person who can not only be a person, but it can be something abstract. It can be the fear of losing your job, or it can be the destruction of the environment, and then you can pick possible others. And when you have decided on this, you can decide what's my story, and then in the second step, create a dramatic arc and tell your story. And I would like to invite you to use that as often as possible, tell stories rather than use bullet points and PowerPoint, because you really create a connection to your audience. Now?
Wow, that was in time.
I have 30 seconds left, so
yeah, so
those are to you.
Yeah, those are to you. That means we have a bit more time for the questions and answers. So if you want to ask anything to our speaker here, to Jaana, then feel free. It's your time now.
Shoot.
Okay, just like this. Usually if there's someone running with a microphone. Anyway.
We've only one here in here.
Yeah, no problem.
That's why.
I think it's loud enough. I'm Mika. I'm working as an IT consultant in the public sector. And I really loved what you showed, how you rethink the business model canvas. Could you explore or tell us more about the about you aspects? There's the one bullet point, the mentor, I think. I didn't catch that.
The mentor. Oh, wait a second. No, this is the different one. The mentor. No protagonist finds the solution, fights the dragon on his own, on her own. So you have to have friends and helpers. That's extremely important, because it creates the spirit of a team. And the mentor is somebody like Yoda or Obi-Wan who meets the hero and accompanies him for a certain amount of time, but then steps back. And like in real life, you could, I don't know if you do mentoring or you've been a mentee to somebody, but it's extremely helpful to have some wiser person who accompanies you along the way and gives you some insights and answers questions. And then you become, on your hero's journey, you can become a mentor yourself at some point.
Do I integrate this in my storytelling?
I would do so. It's very helpful. And it's also a pattern that we all have in our brain, that there is a mentor and he comes but then he leaves us at some point. So that makes the story, you can convince people with that. And when you look at films, and you will now, you've seen this. My students always complain that we can never watch films without thinking of you again and all other things you taught us. You will always see the different archetypes and the different roles in it: the hero, the antagonist, the sidekick, the mentor, wise old man. There are numerous archetypes.
We've just organized a microphone for the questions, so. Yeah, feel prepared. If you have another questions, you will be like forced to use the microphone.
I'll try it this way. I think for this room it might work. Now we want to
I see.
We are recording the
raise
whole
much more
thing. That's why.
Could you give an example for a manipulative? No, what? Eine manipulative story. Manipulative story. You were talking about that.
An example for a manipulative story.
Yes.
Yeah, for example, there's a lot of ads where you are triggered as a parent, for example, from buying an automobile that's extremely safe. And the stories, they tell stories where the children leave the house and they nearly get hit by a car, but they don't because the car has some device that prevents that. So your children are safe, and that triggers anxiety. And I would never promote to use that kind of stories because they work, but anxiety is never a good driver. You can manipulate people to a certain extent with pressure and anxiety, but at some point they just drop out. Any more questions? Story told. Yeah. Okay, I hope you all got something out of this, and please use more stories, and you'll find a lot about that on YouTube and also TED Talks. It's very useful. You want to ask some question?
Yeah. I have a question. You are into storytelling. Is there a story which you tell when it's about the whole topic? So do you go outside, tell your story, and what does it look like?
Yeah, I'm always afraid of that question, to be honest. I try not to, because then the people I work with try to model it after this story, and I'm actually as bad as everybody to start and get some messages across. But what I do is collect moments in my life that I experience and then that I love, and when I feel emotionally attached, and I collect them and then I weave them into the stories I tell. For example, the one you introduced me when I have 2 siblings and we fought a lot, and like it's with the 3 of us. And one day I discovered that when I start telling a story and they finish the story and we make it as a serial, everybody can pick apart. Then we don't fight, and we create a nice atmosphere together. So this is something that I would also invite you to pick things from your moments from your childhood and share them. That's a very good leadership thing, to share vulnerability and share personal moments.
It's really interesting for me because you talk about storytelling, but now we find out that there are also situations in which it might be clever maybe not to tell a story because you don't want people to copy it. But that's also learning, isn't it? Because as soon as you understand what stories do, you just are aware of the topic, and then you can also decide maybe in one or the other edge case that it might be dangerous or it might be misleading telling a story in this case. Is it what you were saying, or did I misunderstand that?
No, please copy everything. This is how we learn, too, when we copy and learn and make iterations and break things and put them together in another way. No, it's rather that I don't, when I work with teams, I rather not start with telling a story because they believe I'm a storyteller, which I'm not. I'm a story developer. And then they think, yeah, we should do it like Jaana said, because she's the expert, which is bullshit, because you're all storytelling experts. You all tell stories. You just have to give it some time to find the courage to do so instead of logic.
So this was again really on time. Thank you so much for your interest. I've just been told that there's also some breakfast on the 6th floor, which is not far. So if you're interested in the next talk, you can just go up 1 level, come back, and then I see you in 6 minutes if you want to. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here.